Hi, I'm Zach, and I want to talk about the games that came out this year that I played. I didn't play loads of new games in 2021, and this is also the year where I unfortunately finished a lot less games than I started. This year, I'm not giving out different awards like last year, I'm just ranking the games from 1 to 9. Why 9? Because I only played 9 games that came out this year. Also, I may mention spoilers for any of the games that I'm about to list, so let's start with our first game, number 9. I don't think it's a secret to anyone who knows me that Slay the Spire is one of my all-time favourite games, since I did rank it as my 18th favourite game of the decade. So of course, since playing that, I've tried to find games that can quench my card-based roguelite thirst, and unfortunately I have not yet found anything that can replicate the award-winning formula that Slay the Spire brought to the table. That's not to say that Griftlands doesn't try though. While putting a deck of cards together to try and win battles is the core idea behind Griftlands, it's also got so much more going on. It's got an ally and enemy system, meaning that NPCs will remember if you helped them or slighted them. You need help from the barkeep? Unfortunately, you decided to kill their best friend a little earlier in the run, and now they won't help you, and they've doubled the prices of all of their drinks. Another core mechanic is that you don't play with just one deck, you actually play with 2. One is for physical fights, while the other is for debates, so you can try and talk your way out of whatever sticky situation you've managed to get yourself into. And probably the biggest thing that sets it apart from Slay the Spire, at least in my opinion, is that it's trying to tell a story. And not just one story, but a different story for each of the 3 playable characters, each with their own playstyles and different decks. Yes, Slay the Spire sort of, kind of, not really, but kind of does have a story, but not in the way that Griftlands does. Oh, and by the way, it's a Clay-developed game, so its art style is absolutely gorgeous. And yet, despite all of this, I didn't get a lot out of Griftlands, and I think it's because of 2 reasons. The first and main reason is that there's too much stuff, and as such, any one run takes way longer than I would prefer. And the second reason is that Clay games and I kind of just don't get along. I love Terraria and Minecraft, and yet Don't Starve doesn't do anything for me. RimWorld and Satisfactory are awesome games, but I was done with Oxygen Not Included as soon as my first batch of clones all died. So yeah, unfortunately me and Griftlands didn't really get along all that well, but don't get me wrong, I didn't think it was a bad game by any stretch, or else I wouldn't be talking about it. And if you think a more narrative-driven Slay the Spire with an alliance system is something that you would gel with, you may just enjoy Griftlands a lot more than I did. But as it stands, I gotta rank Griftlands as my 9th game of the year. Doki Doki Literature Club Plus is Doki Doki Literature Club again, but this time you have to pay for it, and there's a little bit of extra optional content stuffed in there to sweeten the deal. The main reason I got this was to support Team Salvato, because I want them to have the funds to be able to make whatever games they want to make in the future. If you've played DDLC before, you should only get this if you want the extra side stories that are included, or if you want to, like me, support the developers. If you haven't played DDLC before, then what the fuck, go and play DDLC. It's more or less just a remaster, and this isn't my first rodeo with the game, so I'm ranking it as my 8th game of the year and swiftly moving on. I'm not gonna lie, I set my expectations for this game a little bit too high. When I saw that Gears of Breakfast were publishing this game, I stoked myself up expecting something that was going to rival A Hat in Time. This is not what Here Comes Nico is, or is even trying to be. Here Comes Nico is a super chill 3D platformer about making people happy. You play as Nico and are tasked with running about on different islands doing different tasks for different characters in order to progress to the next level. The first thing that caught my eye when I saw this game was how the player and all of the characters are in 2D and all of the environments are in 3D. I love the look of this game, it's endearingly cute and very charming. The main thing that kept kept me from finishing this game was its lack of any real challenge. I wouldn't say it's very hard to beat a hat in time, but I also wouldn't say it's very easy. However, Here Comes Nico really doesn't have any kind of fail states in the game. There's no lives and not much in the way of hazards. The most you'll have to do if you mess up a jump is retry the jump. I like my platformers to have some difficulty to them, and in that regard, Here Comes Nico wasn't able to deliver, at least not for me. It probably also doesn't help that right before I played this game, I gave Celeste another shot and actually beat quite a lot of it. If you've played Celeste, you know it's not exactly the easiest game out there, but instead of comparing Here Comes Nico to all of these other games, which is the mistake I've made, you should just see it as what it is, and what it is a very chill platformer for when you're just in the mood to do some fun platforming, and as such, I'm ranking it as my 7th game of the year. Super Auto Pets is one of the only games I've ever played more on my phone than I have on my PC, and that's saying a lot because I'm quite vocal about how I think mobile games are generally pretty fucking bad. Unfortunately for me though, Super Auto Pets has mega just play one more turn energy, and as such I spent quite a lot of time playing this game through the summer. If I had nothing to do or if I was waiting for something and I had my phone with me, I would just start up Super Auto Pets and play probably a few more rounds than I should have. In Super Auto Pets, you try to create a powerful team of 5 animals that all have different abilities that change how your team plays. You may combine 2 of the same type of animal in order to level them up, and every few rounds, the pool of animals you can purchase from gets larger. Then, every time you end your turn, your team of animals are pitted against another player's team of animals, and they fight until you either win, lose, or draw. Your objective is to try and win 10 rounds without losing all of your lives. Lose all of your lives and you start over, win 10 rounds and you win. Hooray! It's a great game for when you've got time to spare, and obviously the iconic squeeze me, freeze me, pill me, roll me, you piece meme cannot be overlooked, and as such, I'm ranking Super Auto Pets as my 6th game of the year. I really like the original Subnautica. It's certainly not without its flaws, but my time with the game is an experience I won't soon forget. So obviously when I found out that they were making a sequel / spin-off, I couldn't not give it a shot. I bought Subnautica Below Zero when it first came out in early access, played the game for about 3 hours, which at the time was enough to explore almost all of the content, and I then proceeded to wait until the game came out of early access so I could enjoy a fully formed and finished product. I'm glad I did that, as the final version of Below Zero was without a doubt a much more polished game. But if I had to compare it to Subnautica, which I do, since it's directly tied to that game, it unfortunately falls flat by quite a bit. First, let's talk about the positives. The setting is a great idea, a different part of the same planet from the first game, inhabited by a lot of similar creatures we saw previously, but also occupied by different creatures due to the colder climate, is a fun setting for the game to toy around with. Obviously the art style and how everything looks is still as good as, if not better than, the first game. I also do like the more linear story that this game is trying to tell. Unlike the first game, the player character isn't a mute nobody who just wants to get off of this hellish water world, but is in fact a character with an actual goal. Hell, she even dives into the waters of this world on purpose to find out what happened to her sister who died in some kind of expedition. But now I have to move on to the things I didn't like about Below Zero. I think the biggest problem I have with this game is the scope of it. I feel like Below Zero is both too big and too small at the same time. In the first Subnautica game, by the time I had gotten bored of going through all of the biomes in the game and I had gotten bored of all of the resource collecting and grinding, I had the means to build a rocket, escape the planet, and finish the game, which is what I did. But in Below Zero, by the time I had had enough of the game wasn't done with me yet. I still needed to figure out what to do with the big frozen guy in the caves, and I still needed to figure out how to eject the alien that was sharing my brain out. Despite this though, I probably would have finished the game if it weren't for the awful on-land sections. The first game had 2 on-land areas and they both sucked as well. But in Below Zero, there are 2 on-land parts in particular that rubbed me the wrong way. One of these is when you are tasked with finding an NPC's greenhouse, which you are told is located on one of the icebergs out to the east of the map. I spent ages exploring these icebergs, and since visibility above water is really limited due to the constant snow, I had to resort to looking up where exactly this greenhouse was online. The straw that broke the camel's back, however, was the area in which you are expected to use the hoverbike vehicle, the Snow Fox, to traverse. This area really sucked all the enjoyment I was getting out of the game. Having to constantly dismount the Snow Fox, walk around a bit to see if I was in the place that the game wanted me to be, and then remount the Snow Fox when I was not, was no fun. I kept getting lost and turned around each time I tried to return from this area to the ocean. But despite all of this, I do think Below Zero is a good game, and I hope that they take a crack at making a proper Subnautica 2 one day with no on-land sections. As it is now though, I'm still ranking Subnautica Below Zero as my 5th game of the year. I'm starting to really fall in love with short games that stick to one idea and execute that idea really well. Horror is a genre of game that I wish I could get into, but I simply cannot due to the amount of unfiltered stress and anxiety I experience while playing them. Creepy games, however, are a slightly different story. I love playing games where you get this feeling that something is just ever so slightly off and not as it's supposed to be. Well, Buddy Simulator 1984 captures that feeling perfectly. It starts out as an MS-DOS-like interface where you can only play the most rudimentary of games with a simple AI, but from there it turns into a text-based adventure game and then into a quaint 2D adventure game and continues from there. Truth be told, I'd rather not spoil much about this game, so if you'd rather not be spoiled, jump to this timestamp on screen now. If you're still listening to this section, I want to talk about how the game continues to evolve. After the 2D adventure section, we then jump to a 2.5D RPG in the vein of the Mario and Luigi games on the DS. This part of the game is the only bit where it drags on just a bit too long in my opinion. It is still a fun section though. Despite the game clearly going through each stage of the evolution of games, for some reason I did not expect it to turn into a first-person game right at the end, and the dread I felt at having to continue at that point was insane. Thankfully, the game only really has one jump scare during this section, and I don't actually think it was intended to be a jump scare. It still made me jump a little though. The game also has a song with vocals during its end credits, and I adore it when games do that. I ended up finishing the game in just under 4 hours, and I felt that was just the right length. If you're looking for a short and creepy game that is low-key a love letter to a lot of classic games, I can easily recommend Buddy Simulator 1984. It also let me name my buddy Goobert, so I'm ranking it as my 4th favourite game of the year. Back in 2018, when the first chapter of Deltarune was released, I had a good time with my playthrough, but I didn't get the feeling that the full game would be able to measure up to Toby Fox's previous game, Undertale, which is totally not something I expected it to do in the first place, simply due to just how much of a monumental success Undertale actually was. But man, after playing through Chapter 2, maybe once it's complete, Deltarune will actually be able to steal the spotlight from Undertale. Chapter 2 of Deltarune is so damn good that it made me realize that Chapter 1 was just a glorified tutorial. It feels like Chapter 2 is an improvement over Chapter 1 in every aspect. I think the music is better, I think the writing is sharper overall, and the characters are more fleshed out. Chapter 2 is funnier. Oh my God, is it funnier. It is so rare that I actually laugh out loud at anything anymore, but I did so multiple times during my multiple playthroughs of Chapter 2. Noelle and Birdley being central characters in this chapter is great, and I much prefer Queen as the main antagonist over the King from Chapter 1. The Punch-Out minigame early in the game being foreshadowing for the final battle against Queen is brilliant. This chapter adds in an alternate route through the game that functions similarly to the genocide route from Undertale, but I think it's done in a much less annoying way here. And boy, is the alternate route through this game creepy as all hell. I love it. And the one last thing I have to mention, which is the absolute highlight of this chapter for me and many others, is Spampton G. Spampton. I love this stupid little salesman so much. Not to mention that both of his boss battle themes are just fucking ace. That is some peak Toby Fox right there. Despite the fact that Deltarune will probably be one of my all-time favorite games when all of its chapters are finished and released, I'm going to have to rank Deltarune Chapter 2 as my third favorite game of the year due to it only being a very tasty slice of a much larger game. God, now I have to wait at least another 2 years until I can get more of this game. God damn it. Back when Inscription was announced by Daniel Mullins, who previously released Pony Island and The Hex, both of which are games I love, I was pretty confident that Inscription was going to be my game of the year. And technically, it is, even though I've put it as number 2. You'll understand when we get to number 1 on the list. But for now, I refuse to be the one who spoils this game for you, and as such I will talk about it as much as I can without giving anything away. Inscription is about playing a deadly card game against a dark figure whilst you are trapped in a cabin. Either win the card game and escape, or die trying. Inscription is part roguelike card game, part escape room. The mysterious figure who has trapped you and is forcing you to partake in his card game of life and death isn't against you getting up and stretching your legs every once in a while. Maybe you can find something in the cabin that will tip the odds in your favor, or maybe there's more to this card game than it first appears. Either way, Inscription is a bloody good romp from start to finish, and I can heartily recommend this game to both fans of Daniel Mullins' previous works and fans of deck builder games. Just trust me when I say that Inscription really does deserve to be ranked as my second game of the year. My game of the year for 2021 is undoubtedly The Binding of Isaac: Repentance. I know it's not technically a full game and that it's actually just DLC, but fuck me, it might as well be a new game with how much it adds and tweaks. I liked Rebirth enough when it first came out, and when the first DLC, Afterbirth, came out, I got really into the game. Then they made Afterbirth Plus, which was met with very mixed reviews upon release, but I think it was a decent addition to the game in the long run. Meanwhile, a mod for the game by the name of Anti-Birth was released by a team of very talented people for free, and many would argue that it was a better final product than Afterbirth Plus. Unfortunately though, the Anti-Birth mod was not compatible with anything other than the base game, and as such, if you wanted to play Anti-Birth, you would end up missing out on a lot of the fun content that Afterbirth added into the game. So, when it was announced that the Anti-Birth mod was being incorporated into one final DLC for the game, titled Repentance, I was beyond excited. It took a while, but the Repentance DLC finally released at the end of March this year, and it took me over 500 hours to 100% it. They added 19 new characters to the game. 19! For a total of 34. And almost all of the new characters are completely unique. Tainted Forgotten throws himself at enemies to do damage. Jacob and Esau are two characters at the same time. Tainted Lilith lets you shoot out a demon fetus like a whip. And Tainted Eden lets you actually experience what it feels like to go insane. They added true co-op to the game. No longer do other players have to play as shitty co-op babies. Instead, every player gets to play as whichever character they want. They added 2 new routes with their own final bosses to the game. I've never been a huge fan of the soundtrack for the game, as when you compare it to the soundtrack from the original Flash version, a lot of it just isn't as good. But all of the new tracks they added for Repentance are undeniable bangers. Juggernaut, Living in the Light, and Revelations 13:1 are all stellar tracks. Probably my biggest worry about Repentance was the items. I was worried that whatever new items they added weren't going to be very original and that they were going to bloat the already rather stuffed item pools. But what did they do? They both introduced loads of new, completely original items, and they buffed and tweaked old items to give them an actual reason to be in the game. Except for Abel, he's still shit. I'm confident in saying that I've never seen a single piece of DLC add this much to a game before, and I doubt I ever will again. Edmund Macmillan, you brilliant little fucker, I will become back my money and rank The Binding of Isaac Repentance as my game of the year.